Good afternoon, everybody. This is Rob Foster with the Vigilon. Thanks for joining today's webinar. We're going to be covering the AD400 wireless locks today. So if there are questions, please feel free to submit those in the chat, as well as you can ask those at the end of the presentation. Okay, so let's just review a little bit from Monday's Lunch and Learn, where Francisco covered the NDE locks and the Engage gateway. Here's the solution comparison. Of course, today we're going to be talking about the AD400. One thing you'll notice, right off the bat is increased range because these locks run at 900 megahertz, versus using low energy Bluetooth. But you'll also notice too that there is a much higher price point, and there is some additional door prep that has to be done.
Hey Rob, your presentation's not moving, man.
Is it what screen is it on?
Still on the first screen. ACM Lunch and Learn.
Interesting. Okay. Okay, if you all can just hold on a second, I will see if I can get this fixed real quick.
There you go.
Okay, how about now?
There you go, man.
Perfect. Thanks, Jared. So one other thing I want to point out about the AD400 versus the NDE lock set is there is an I-class compatible read head that you can order that can read the secure sector of the card. Okay, some key features, kind of the same as with the NDE lock set. It's an all-in-one solution. So all your door components all are contained within the lock set. So you're not putting a Rex over the door, a separate card reader on the wall, cutting in a strike. All your components are right there in one combined lock set. Of course, there's many different form factors, cylindrical mortise, even exit trim options as well, and also multiple credential options, as we talked about. And finally, as I mentioned on the previous slide, 900 megahertz wireless communication, which enables further distances between the wireless lock and the PIM module, which we'll talk about in future slides here. And also this lock can be used with lockdowns. So this is an online solution that is communicating with the Mercury panel in real time.
Hey Rob.
Presentation's
still stuck, man. It's stuck on the comparison slide, slide 3. There it goes. Now you're on architecture.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Okay, not sure why it keeps pausing. Yeah, thanks, Jared.
No problem.
Sorry for the Thank you. Sorry for the technical difficulties, everyone. So just a little bit on architecture. As you can see, the PIM module that's shown here is hardwired to a Mercury controller. And with that in mind, that gives you the features of a Mercury controller, and also, as I mentioned before, it does allow the lock to be online. Some of the same, we can support similar numbers, as far as wireless locks to gateways, or I should say PIM modules rather. Actually, we can do a few more with the PIM modules. We can do up to 16 locks on a PIM module. Realistically out there, unless you have a cluster of doors that are really close together, you probably won't end up putting 16 locks on a PIM module, but you can. Also, you can have up to 8 PIM modules on an RS485 bus. So even though what's shown here is a LP 1501 that only supports a total of 16 doors, you could theoretically have 8 PIM modules, with 2 doors connected to each. All right. Just going to the next slide here. You can see, the architecture is really the same as the previous slide, but I'm showing that you can have additional PIM modules. And also, there's a enclosure option that allows you to put a 1501 in with the PIM 400 module. Nice all-in-one enclosed solution. You can plug in your Ethernet here. You can power your PIM module over PoE. So it's a great solution, for some of those hard to reach areas. So just keep that in mind. Okay, so some additional considerations when using the AD400 locks. As I mentioned before, there's additional modification to the door beyond just a standard mortise and cylindrical prep, and I'll show you that on the next slide. Also requires a handheld device for initial setup and maintenance. This is a special device that you need to order from Allegion. You can't use your iPhone or Android device to do any configuration. Also, highly recommend that you use a wireless site survey kit. If you don't have one of your own, I would find somebody that does have one and definitely use that before you, actually put together your bill of materials. And finally, just want to mention the Schlage electronic lock configurator. There are, I'm not sure, thousands, maybe millions of different combinations with, finishes and trim and lever types, and reed head types, and so on and so forth. There's a million different combinations. The Schlage electronic lock configurator will help you work through those options and get the correct configuration. So I talked about door prep. Here's a standard cylindrical lock set door prep. It's this hole down here. If you're doing a retrofit application, this is probably already here. But here are the additional holes that you'll have to drill to be able to use the AD400 lock set. There's also a path that you have to cut here for the door contact as well. Something to keep in mind, if this is not a new construction project where the doors are being prepped by the door hardware provider, I would get a qualified contractor to come in, a qualified door hardware contractor, I should say, versus, just trying to use your drill and kind of freehand punch some holes through the door. I've seen people do that before, and it usually ends very badly. Here's the test kit, just an image of it. You can see that you've got a test reader here, and then a PIM module that, you obviously set that where you plan to put your PIM 400, and then walk this device around where you plan to put your readers. And this way you can test to make sure that you have adequate signal. The handheld device that I mentioned previously, here's a picture of the current model. There's some other models that have been out there. This product's been, I'm not exactly sure how many years it's been in production, but I'm thinking at least 15 years. So we've seen some different revisions of this as we've gone, couple things to keep in mind. This does require, to use this device, you have to be able to synchronize it with your Windows workstation. So it's going to require Windows Mobile Device Center. And that when you have that configured, that allows you to transfer things like firmware files or the Schlage utility software that's used to actually connect to the locks. If you need to upgrade that, you'll need to be able to transfer those files from your Windows computer over to the handheld device. And one other thing I want to point out, if you're using Windows 10 and you try to set up the Windows Mobile Device Center, you're probably never going to get a connection to this device if you don't first contact Allegion Tech Support and get the patch. This patch, they'll have to actually apply this patch for you. But once that patch is applied, then you'll be able to connect your computer to the handheld device. So here's the address for the Schlage electronic lock configurator. Just keep in mind, another good reason why you want to use this electronic lock configurator and get all of your options correct is wireless locks are built to order and you can't return them. So if you make a mistake, you get the wrong trim option, or whatever the case is, you're not going to be able to return those locks. So definitely use this to configure your locks. Okay, so just to talk about, go through the configuration a little bit. I'm just going to walk through some slides as far as setting up the devices with the handheld device. That doesn't really show real well, in this forum. So let me just walk through that. Just a quick summary of what we're going to do in these configuration steps. First, I'm going to talk about how to wire actually the PIM module. It says AD400, but the PIM module to the Mercury controller. Then we're going to talk about how to connect the AD400 locks to the PIM module. And at that point, we're going to have to use the HHD device. And then we'll go into ACM. We'll set up the panel and the sub panel. The sub panel in this case will be a PIM 400. And then we'll set up our door, which is actually the AD400 lock. Okay, so wiring. Here's an example of, we've got in this case, EP1501. It's going to be hardwired down to the first PIM 400 module. And in this example, we're showing wiring a second PIM module as well. So you can see over here on the EP1501, we're using the downstream 485 port. We're going into the first PIM module. And then we're going to daisy chain off of that, just like you would if you were, connecting your MR52s downstream. And then we'll go to the second device here. Something to keep in mind, you can see that this does require a physical wiring loop, from one device to the second. If that doesn't really work in your environment, if you'd rather, do more of a star configuration, just keep in mind you could use the MUX8 multiplexer device and put it here with the 1501, and that would allow you to wire your PIM modules out in the field in a star configuration. Okay, so after we wire up the PIM 400 module or modules to the controller, what we need to do is get out our HHD. So in this case, we're going to assume you've already set up your HHD. You've got it synchronizing with your computer. You've updated your SUS software. You've grabbed any firmware files, if needed, to upload to your PIM module as well as your locks. So the actual HHD device will connect to the lock with the USB connection. So it's a hardwired connection. This is different from the NDE locks where you connect over Bluetooth. You are going to actually physically have to go to the door and plug in the USB cable. So once you do that, you're going to connect first to the PIM module. And the most important thing here is to go to the PIM properties and set your RS485 address. Don't forget this address because you're going to have to set this in the ACM software as well. You're also going to need to set your low and high door options. By default, it's set, your low door is set to 0 and your high door is set to 15. If that will work in your environment, great, leave those defaults, then apply those settings. And now after we do that, we're going to disconnect from the PIM module and we're going to go over to your locks. Maybe it's just one lock. I'm just going to talk about doing this on one lock. Obviously, you would just repeat this process with additional locks that are connecting to that PIM. So now you're going to plug in your USB connector to the bottom of the lock. And when we get to the demo portion, I'll show you where that's located. What we'll do is we'll link the doors at this point. We'll go into device options. Sorry, I've got there we go. So what we're going to do is we're going to go in, we're going to go to the PIM module, device options, PIM properties, and then we're going to we're going to actually link the doors. So you can see here, I'm going to select door 1, then I'm going to click on the link button. Now, one important step, the lock that you're going to link with, you have to put it in link mode. And to do this, it's going to require 2 hands. You're going to need to go to the lock, and you're going to need to go to the inside lever, and you're going to need to hold that lever down. And while you're holding that lever down, you need to take a credential and present it to the reader. After you present it to the reader, the credential to the reader, continue to hold that lever down until the Schlage button on the front of the lock starts to blink. Then you can actually link the door to the PIM module. Okay, so now that we've done that, you can disconnect the HHD device. You know, just a note about the HHD device, these things have a tendency to grow legs and walk off and disappear from the site. We also have some people that will buy one HHD device, you know, for the office versus buying one for each customer site. You know, again, they tend to get lost. I would make sure you buy an HHD device for each location where you're going to deploy these, and leave that device on site somewhere that it can be easily found. Because if you do need to make changes in the future, you know, such as update firmware, or if you need to get diagnostic information from the lock, you're going to need that HHD device. So with that said, just going to quickly walk through some of the configuration options. So now that we have everything wired up, we've got our doors linked to our PIM module. Now we're going to go to ACM and actually set up the controller of our panel, sub panel, and then configure the door. So you can see here in my example, I used an EP1501. Make sure that when you set this up, you know, for the model, make sure you select with downstream. Even though you're not going to have any Mercury subcontrollers, that AD400 is treated like a subcontroller. So make sure you select the downstream, or if you don't, you won't be able to connect the PIM module. So after you add the panel, you're going to add the sub panel. Make sure you select, when you go to pick your model, select the AD400, or excuse me, the PIM 400 module. And again, here where it says address, this is your RS-485 address. Make sure that matches the address that you set on the PIM module. In my example, I set it to 0. So you can see here, I've also set it to 0, you know, in the sub panel configuration. Also, your low and high door numbers will need to match as well. So then we set up our door, and it's just like setting up any other door in the system. You know, you have the same options. There is one additional option that I want to talk about, and that's the lock function. The reason I want to bring this up is because a lot of people will set this lock function, and they'll set it to a value, you know, without knowing exactly what that lock function does. So let me bring this up. So these are the lock function options. If you leave it set to none, then it's going to continue to function just like any hardwired door would. Here's where the confusion lies. You know, and I'll just go ahead and admit it, I've made this mistake myself. You know, when you go in and you replace, you know, you're going in to do a job, and you've got additional lock sets, or you have existing lock sets, I should say. Maybe they're privacy lock sets, and you're going to put in an electric strike. Well, you don't want people, you know, twisting that knob and unlocking the door, and then people can just walk through. So you purchase storeroom function lock sets to put on the door to work in conjunction with your electric strike. So one would think, well, I'll just set this lock function to storeroom. Well, if you do that, basically what this does, it becomes a double swipe scenario. So if you walk up and present your credential twice and the door is locked, it will unlock the door, and it will remain unlocked until you present your card, do a double swipe again, and then it will toggle back to, you know, card only mode. So we do get frequent calls. People call and say, hey, the lock set keeps unlocking. And the reason that happens is obviously you set the lock function to classroom, / storeroom. And also keep in mind, sometimes the readers are a little bit slower to respond on the locks than your traditional, hardwired readers, because they do have to wake up. So you do have a lot of people that, especially when they're not used to using that lock set, they'll walk up to present their card. They'll think it didn't read and they'll present it again. And there you go. If you've set the lock function to storeroom, you're going to end up toggling that lock from secure to unlocked. So these lock functions, I won't go through each one, but these are listed in the ACM help. So if you're not sure what something does, review this in the help file before you actually set this. The safest is to leave it set to none. Okay, so I'm just going to open up my software here, just talk about a couple things. As you can see, I've gone ahead and I've set up my my panel, which is the EP1501. You'll see that I have an alarm. The reason I have an alarm here is because I'm using the enclosure that includes the 1501 and the PIM module, and that module has a tamper switch. And right now I have the lid taken off of that enclosure so that I can show you inside of it. So this is what it's going to look like in an environment where you have a 1501 and one PIM module. You notice that I also have my sub panel here. Currently you can see my locks and alarm, and that's because for my door position switch is an alarm because it's currently open. Walk over here to the door configuration. You can see that the AD400 is here. You can see from last week, these are the doors that I showed in the lockdown scenario. Just to show you quickly, real quick, I added this lock to the lockdown scenario, so it's going to function just like these hardware doors. So if I go over here, I go to my lockdown dashboard and I do a hard lockdown. You're going to notice over here under physical access and doors, you're going to see that the door mode has changed to priority card only. The wireless lock set has changed this status, as well as the hardwired locks. So again, you'll see with the door configuration, just like I mentioned before, everything set up just like a hardwired door. Just remember, lock function actually does something here. You will need to, when you set up the door, you'll need to select the panel and the sub panel and the door number. So that will be a little bit different from your hardwired door configuration. Okay, so I'm just going to show you a couple things on video here. As you can see, I've kind of got the collection here of, I have the enclosure that I talked about previously that has the PIM 400 module, and then it's got the EP1501 module. Something that you typically have here that I've removed just to make it easier for configuration. Here's the USB port where you connect your handheld device. Typically, by default, there is an extension plugged in here, and this comes to the outside of the enclosure. So this makes it really convenient if you need to do a firmware update on the AD400, or excuse me, the PIM 400 module. You can do that without removing the lid. And in this case, activating the tamper switch. I've removed it again. Like I said, it's a little bit easier for me to get to just because this isn't mounted, in a typical place. Also keep in mind, if you wanted to use this for your first PIM module, maybe you're going to have additional PIM modules, down the RS485 chain, you could remove this connector, and that leaves a hole there where you can take your RS485 connection here, take it down through that hole where the USB connector was, and take it out to the next PIM module. You got the network connector here. You can see there's an extension going from the connector underneath to the EP1501. In this case, it's very convenient. I'm using PoE to power my EP1501. And then you can see that I'm taking auxiliary power from the 1501 or the voltage out, and I'm going up to the PIM module here. So everything is powered over PoE. Don't have to run a separate power supply to this. You can just put this out in the field, run a Cat5, and you're in business. So a couple other things that I will mention. You'll see that the tamper switch here is wired to the EP1501. So if you do have somebody that tampers with this, you will get an alarm. Now I'll mention the Pidian device. This is the handheld device here. Don't lose the stylus. If you lose the stylus, it's not going to work very well with your finger. So make sure when you're done with the stylus to put it back here. Now this is the cable for the device. This is not a standard connector here. You can see this. This isn't like a standard USB connector. So not only is it important that you put the handheld unit in a safe location, it's also very important that you put the cable. I might even suggest that you wrap the cable around the device, because you're not going to be able to go to Best Buy or something like that to get this cable. Okay, now this is an example of just transitioning over to the wireless lock. This is an example of an AD400 lock. This one just has a prox read head on it. This was ordered without the core option. Obviously, you wouldn't put it on a door like this because it'd be very easy to stick a screwdriver in here and unlock the door. So make sure that you get your core option. If you're ordering this for a customer with an existing keying system, you'll want to definitely check with the facilities people and make sure you order the right core option. As you can see here, this is the hole that I talked about drilling for the actual door contact. Luckily, you don't have to drill very far into the door. So the chances of popping out the side are a lot less, but still it could happen. Again, I would recommend you get a qualified door hardware contractor to actually do the door prep for you. This is the back of the unit. You can see it does take up a lot more room on the door. And you need to be mindful, again, when I showed you in the template, you had screws here, 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 and here, or holes, I should say, through the door, then down here as well. Remember, those holes will be there forever. So, you're kind of committed to this lock. If you do want to do a retrofit, you're probably looking at putting some kind of door wrap, around this door to cover up those holes if you go back to a more traditional sized lock here. So keep that in mind. And so with that, I'd like to open it up to any questions. Feel free to come off mute and ask any questions that you may have.
Yeah, Rob, there was one question that I kind of started to answer, and then I was hoping you could expand upon. A question from Nicholas: can you explain the low door, high door a little bit more in detail, and how that affects panels and door counts with Mercury and ACM?
Yeah, so my understanding of it, and Jared, you might be able to do a better explanation than I can, is that you have, if you're going to have more than one PIM module, you may have to lower that high door and low door. You may have to use less, or maybe a better example would be if you're going to use like an AD300 lock, which is a hardwired lock set. My understanding is you have to share those high door and low door numbers with the AD300 lock set. So in that case, you may have to lower that high number. If you're going to put two AD300 lock sets, you may have to take that high number down to 13, or I guess 14.
Yeah, essentially,
Do you have a
guys,
better explanation?
yeah, the high door and low door makes it so that you can't go over your total door count on your controller. So if you have an EP1501 and you have 4 PIM 400s and you're going to try to do a total of 16 wireless locks and you're going to put 4 doors on each one of those PIMs, then you want to set the low and high door on each PIM to 0 to 3 on each one, so that way it's not going to go over your limit for the amount of doors. If you don't set the low and high door, especially with using like an EP1501 or an LP1501, and you leave it at 16 at the maximum for low and high door, if you were to try to install a second PIM, ACM would actually do a check and say, no, you can't, because we've already reserved the space on the subcontroller on the PIM 400 for 16 doors. So it does go, hand in hand with the planning for your installation. You want to make sure that you're planning where you're putting your PIMs, how many locks per PIM you're going to be able to do. Also factor in future growth for those, for those devices. So if you know that, hey, in 6 months I'm going to add two doors to this, then I want to be able to expand that by 2 doors or 8 doors or whatever it is. So you want to make sure that you're, being conscious of that. 2 good questions from Tony and Mark. There are a couple places that you can get the installation jigs from. I know here in California, Access Hardware is a distributor. I do know that I believe Annixter is also supplying those. There are different jigs for the different models. So the AD400, AD300 is basically the same, the same hole pattern. So you can reach out to one of those distributors for that. Don't quote me on the price, but they're somewhere in between $100 and $200 per jig.
Yeah, and definitely use the jig. Don't freehand it. You will never get the holes straight, and the lock will never go on correctly.
Yeah, that's totally true. We've got a question from Jeff Silberg. Can you put 2 locks back to back to establish a man trap?
I would say, well, how would you do that?
You wouldn't.
How would you get this?
I was hoping, yeah, that one for you. But the answer to that one, Jeff, is actually no. So because there's no module on the battery module for the lock is on the inside. So it's on the secure side of the door. There's no way to not utilize that module along with the lever and all of the the mechanical stuff that goes along with it. Currently, there is no way to do that. If you're looking for something like that, then you would be tying a hardwired reader on the inside. But keeping in mind that the AD400 and the AD series in general does have options for exit trim, so you can do connect these to a crash bar with an integrated Rex. There's a lot of different integrations for the AD series of locks that allows you to retrofit existing doors really easily. So I've done a couple projects now where just standard 98 or 99 R crash bars, pull the crash bar off, install the AD400, put it back on, and everything works together with minimal changes to the door.
Perfect. Thanks, Jared.
No problem.
Let's see any other questions here. Yeah, I'm not seeing any other questions.
Hey Rob, and I'm sorry if I missed it. Did you talk about the range on the ADs on the PIM module and like the recommended range?
I didn't go into it specifically. I mean, I've listed the theoretical range. On a good day with blue skies, no obstructions, no alien transmissions. And that's you're never going to get that theoretical range, and it's and I'll let Jared add to this, but that site survey kit is extremely important because you will get all kinds of obstructions inside of a building. So yeah, don't skimp on that. Definitely get a test kit. If you don't have a test kit, your Allegion reps out there do. They're usually willing to come out and help with that. They're probably not going to come out for a one lock opportunity. Just keep that in mind. They're spread thin just like the rest of us. So keep that in mind. Jared, did you want to add anything to the
the only thing I was going to add to that was we do there is an external antenna available for the PIM modules. So if you're doing if you do need additional range, or if you're trying to get more line of sight type of a application, there is an external module where you could mount the PIM module. Yep. So you can mount the PIM inside, and if you were trying to hit like a pull gate or a gate within a certain range, right? We're still got to think in theory of of reality here. If you're trying to get it within a certain range, you can basically shoot the signal over to the location. Keep in mind this is so the PIM 400 uses 900 megahertz as well, which is not the same as the NDE. 900 megahertz has the ability to blast through objects a little bit better than 2.4 does. So typical interior walls and things like that. A lot of times you can extend your signal beyond what you might think you can. However, Rob is absolutely right. Using the test kit, using your local Allegion resources. Allegion has great resources throughout the country where they can come out to site and help you out with planning your installation, working with you on finishes, lever sets, and things like that. Rob mentioned like the lock that he's showing in his video here is one of probably 25,000 different combinations that you can get for that exact lock, with or without an internal push button, with or without a keypad. I want a Rhodes handle instead of a Sparta. So there's a lot of different things that you can do, and that E-lock configurator. And yeah, Rob, if you want to just maybe go through that, spend a couple of minutes on going through how to configure that would be, I think, really helpful.
Yeah, so this is the Schlage electronic lock configurator. I've already logged in. It'll allow you to store information and project files. So it's great reference to go back to. If you did a project a year ago and you're trying to remember how you configured that lock, it'll be saved for you here. And you also have options to export that file as well. So I've just set my project name as test. I'm going to select my series. In this case, I'll keep it at AD900 since that's what we've been talking about. You're going to select your chassis. I'm just going to keep it simple and go with cylindrical. And now it pops up, it gives you some information about different functions that you can select, LED options. You can get it without the door position switch. I don't know why you'd want to. I would, it's not a big cost or not much of a savings to take the door position switch off. But anyway, you can keep it, or you could remove the door position switch. Maybe you've got an existing one there. And I didn't show it on the lock. The door position switch wires into a set of inputs on the lock itself. So if you already did have, door contacts installed with the door and you want to, this is a retrofit scenario and you did want to reuse that door contact, you can bring that down and wire it into the lock. So that might be an option where this, might be helpful, without the door position switch. But I will leave this. I'm going to go with the storeroom function lock. That's just my preference. And then you have reader options here. Here's the I-class read head. Just keep in mind, if you do this I-class read head, it is not a multi-technology reader. It is just an I-class reader. So keep that in mind if you do go with this option. Also have a keypad I-class reader as well. Now, this is where, you know, if you're not real familiar with door hardware, you know, you might want to work with your Allegion rep or somebody that's familiar with all these different styles of levers. Gosh, I'm not even sure which each one of these are, but you know, you can, if you look at the cut sheet for the AD400 or the data sheet, it shows you these various options. Finish 626 it defaults to. That's like the default go-to finish. That's what you see in most buildings, but you can see there's many different other options in case you've got customers using something different. Here's a big one, the cylinder type. This one gets missed a lot. And usually it's because there's an existing keying system and you know, you're not sure exactly what that keying system is, or you know, what type of cylinder you need to actually house the type of removable core that they're using. A lot of different options here. You know, you definitely want to get this right. Here's your handing information. You know, there is a way to switch the handing if you do order the wrong, you know, handing, but it's going to cost you time in the field. So, you know, try to get your handing correct here. I'm just going to select left hand, your battery options, your back set, your latch, your strike plate size and style, door thickness. It looks like I wasn't aware of this. It looks like there is a residential door option as well. That's a, you know, a little bit thinner than a commercial door. So it looks like you do have that option with the AD400. They're going to charge you for it though. Until after I select all these options, I say create a configuration for me. It's going to show me the MSRP. And finally, the most important thing, this is your part number. This is what you need to order. If you're hopefully getting a quote from us for the lock, send us this sheet. And you may have multiple sheets, you know, for different types of locks, that's fine. But if you export this to PDF and send it to us, that way we quote you the right lock with all the right options. Just export the PDF, creates the PDF, and then I would save it. Great reference, put this in the project file in case you need to come back to it later. If you do forget or you don't print this, you can always get back into the website and find the project information as well. I'm not sure how long Allegion retains that project information. I'm sure it's not indefinite, but you know, would be good to go ahead and export this and save it as well. All right, any other questions?
Yeah, well, a good question there. Can we set a battery notification?
Within ACM?
Yes.
That's a good question. Let's see if we have a low battery for that. Do you know, Jared?
Yeah, we do. So actually, yeah, if you just do change it to contains. Yep, and search for that. So we've got both low and critical when it comes to the locks. And so what Rob's showing you here is you can go in to your global events and you can create a global event for door low battery. One more up. And door low battery, you can, if you have SMTP set up, you can have that sent as an alarm. There are two levels of battery drain in the AD series. So there's low, which is about, in our world, the battery has about 15%, 15 to 20% capacity left. When it gets to critical, you're looking at around 5%. It's a good best practice that when you do set up a low battery notification and you get a low battery, that you try to change those batteries immediately, because the time frame that a lock will go from low battery status to critical battery status is very quick, because that lock is working really, really hard to try to use what power is left from the batteries. Keep in mind, guys, we're only talking about 5.6 to 6 volts worth of power out of 4 AA batteries. So a certain number of handle turns are going to basically drain that battery to a certain point. We do want to try to set up a low battery status so that we know exactly when that's happening and then replace them. Another good best practice is if you're working in a facility that has multiple AD400 locks, when you start to see your first low battery and you get a couple of those, it's a good time to go through and replace the batteries in all of your locks, because all of your locks have been installed at around the same time. Therefore, they should be on a very similar schedule as far as battery drain. Now, keeping in mind that's based on usage, it's based on distance away from the pin. There's a lot of variables that can factor into that, but absolutely, you can set up notifications for that.
Perfect. And one thing I'll mention too, Jared, wait, look at the other questions. These are standard AA batteries, so there's no special battery pack. I know there's some locks out there that require you to order a special, battery pack. It's got a special connector on it, and they charge you $60 for it. That is not the case here. I've got generic batteries in mine because I'm cheap. So just take note of that. Obviously, throw some AA batteries on the service truck, in case you're the one changing the batteries.
Last question we have here. What's the largest number of wireless locks that can be deployed on an appliance? So unlike a lot of our competitors, ACM, Vigilon, we don't care if it's a wireless lock or a wired lock. You have the capacity for as many readers as you are licensed for. So a wireless lock in our world is just considered a reader. Therefore, we don't have those limitations like some of our competitors do, where you can only have a certain number of wireless locks versus wired. The other really important thing about this, and I'm not sure if Francisco mentioned it in his presentation, we don't charge for wireless lock integration. So once again, a lot of our competitors out there, they have a wireless lock integration license. So you purchase a lock and then you throw another dollar figure on top of that for the pleasure of putting a wireless lock on the system that you just bought. The other thing about that, as far as size and deployments, there's really no limit to how many locks you can have based on our reader counts. Essentially, the only thing you're limited to is how many locks per PIM that you're going to have, and are the PIMs going to overlap in their communication. So unlike a Wi-Fi network that can do things like mesh and they can kind of communicate with each other, these are individual lock to PIM communication hubs. So you technically don't want a whole lot of overlap in your signal between PIM number 1 and locks 0 through 15 and PIM number 2 and locks 0 through 15. You want to try to keep those as separate as possible. So creating pockets is the best way to go about your deployments. But the answer to your question, Daniel, there really is no limit. If you wanted to do a system, I was actually in a system the other day that was 86 wireless locks, and they had no wired locks at all. It was all wireless. So don't ever use lithium batteries. For the last question on there, lithium batteries are not a good idea for these locks because when I talked about that low to critical battery status, these locks go from basically, if you're using lithium batteries, they'll go basically dead once we get that low battery status. It is recommended that you use alkaline, just regular old off-the-shelf batteries. I do use, you know, I bought a pack of 50 off of Amazon, just the regular old Amazon basics for like 12 bucks. It's been sitting in my AD400 for almost 2 years now, and I haven't had to replace them. You can use rechargeable batteries as long as they are as long as they are alkaline or NiCad. Just make sure that that you understand that the lock is not going to recharge the battery. It has no functionality to do that. And yes, last one there. Actually, at the very top of the questions, Michael, there's a link to an Avigilon box folder. The presentation and some other information will be in that link, including all of our previous presentations up to date.
Perfect. Jared, did you answer the other questions? I'm not seeing the answers, but I just want to make sure we covered them.
Is there a way? Charles,
the question about ordering.
Yeah, you kind of covered that. Oh, yeah, I did answer that.
Okay.
Okay. The question from Charles about the questions on a survey sheet that you can use during the site survey. I don't believe that we have a document for that. That might be something that our Legion counterparts do have. You know, in my past as an integrator, we developed our own document for wireless locks. However, that e-lock configurator actually is a mobile aware page. So one of the things I've worked with partners on in the past is just take your phone out to site, open up the e-lock configurator on your phone, and as you're standing in front of a door, just build the configuration right there in front of you, save it as a PDF, and then email it to your Avigilon sales rep, and then, you know, we've got everything that you need. So as far as a hard spec doc, cool. Yeah, I don't have one.
Yeah, I don't have one either. And one thing I would tell you, just from being in the integrator world too, something I always did when I did door surveys, is whether it's for wireless locks or, you know, hardwired or excuse me, you know, just regular hardwired locks, is I would take 5 pictures. I'd take my notebook and I'd write down which door I'm at, give it some intelligent name, take a picture of the signage at the door, whatever, take a picture of that. And then I took 4 pictures of the door. I took a picture of the lock from the exterior side, then one from the interior side. And then I opened up the door and I got a close up of the latch area. Then I spun the camera around and got a close up of the, you know, where the strike area is. You know, sometimes when you've got exit devices, you know, you may have to pull your camera out a little bit to get a picture of it. Good thing on exit devices too is to go take a picture of the, look at the end cap or, you know, the section at the head of the exit device and try to capture a model number. But it's hard to remember of all the things, remember what all the different options are. And, you know, you're looking at a lock set trying to figure out what, you know, what type of finish is that. If you take those pictures, you know, that's going to help out a lot when you get back to the office. No, it takes a little extra time, but it always, you know, always helped me avoid a second, you know, trip to the site. Any other questions? If there's no other questions, we'll go ahead and conclude, excuse me, conclude early. Again, as Jared mentioned, we'll put a copy of the presentation as well as a recording of the webinar out on our box folder. So, you know, feel free to share that link with others, people that couldn't attend the session today or people that want to review some of the information. And with that being said, you know, appreciate everybody's time and you all have a great afternoon.
Awesome. Thanks, Rob.
Thanks, Jared.